In this video, we are finally wrapping up phase 1 of the Nissan with Plastidip, getting it a nice new color and coating. So if you go on to enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. It's free, it helps me out quite a lot, and you could always unsubscribe later if you'd like. So to start off, I needed to remake the splitter because it had shattered when I drove it last because there just wasn't enough front support for the bumper. So that's where we're going with first. I decided to make it out of wood because it's quite a bit more robust instead of just the thin plastic that I first had. Since we're Plastidipping the car and not painting it as the end of phase 1, I wanted to try doing a livery instead of just a plain base color all the way across because I'm going to have to take up the Plastidip eventually anyway, so I figured let's just have a little more fun with it because I've always wanted to try one and this is the perfect opportunity to. So you may notice that I've been using paint as the base for this. The reason is I wanted the nice metallic shine to come out of it for black, and I had it lying around so I didn't want to spend the extra few dollars to get the black Plastidip because in the end when you're going to repaint it you're going to sand everything down again anyway, so it didn't particularly matter.
It's not a game, it's a rage thing.
So for when you're taping off the car, there's a few ways that'll really help you out. So you see the yellow tape there? It's a lot more malleable painter's tape, which means it curves a lot more. So it's a lot easier to get into tighter spaces and to get the correct curvature that you want while it's not going to leak on the edges. So it's very helpful and I really recommend doing it around all the edges of the finer parts that you're taping off. So this here is something that Plastidip sent out with their kit that I never tried before. So it's just like this tarp that comes out with tape along the edges and is really great. It saves a whole lot of time and material. Another thing I do want to mention though really quickly is this blue tape that I'm using. It's fantastic for normal paint jobs, but the issue with the Plastidip is that it actually eats through it just a bit. So what happens is that it soaks through enough to where the stick on the back of the tape actually ends up sticking to whatever material. So it ended up sticking to the windshield, and on some areas where I had designs it would stick to the Plastidip itself. So you don't want that, so I wouldn't recommend using this blue tape for Plastidip because chemically it just doesn't mesh.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.
Another important step to mention, especially if you're working at home and not a specific paint booth, is to wipe down one last time even after you've cleaned all the surfaces right before you start painting or dipping or whatever you're doing, because there's always dust in whatever shop that you're at. So it's really good to go through it one last time just to make sure that when you have the paint or dip, it bonds as best it possibly can. Gray here first is the base for the livery design for more of the detailed aspects. You should always really do these first because it's a lot easier to tape the small designs off than it is to tape off the bigger areas and finish by doing the smaller designs. It saves a whole lot of material in taping and just ends up being easier in the long run. One thing I want to note is that I did take a whole lot of layers per each color or shade that I did, probably 4 or 5 for each at minimum, including clear coat that I did over top of everything. So just take your time with this and make sure that you do everything right. Another thing to mention, although I'm sure you know if you've already been plastic dipping a car or have before in the past, you need to take off the tape when it's wet, because when the plastic dip dies, it's a little rubber that bonds to itself as well, so it will bond over top of the tape and then rip and peel when it comes off. So you need to do it when it is wet, because that way it'll just come right off and give you a nice clean cut on the tape. Something that you won't notice here but I need to mention is that I waited about 12 to 14 hours roughly between painting and taking out the tape at the end to retaping it again. So I just went through with smaller tape, outlined where I wanted the black to be, and then did more tape and coverage over top to cover the areas that would be gray. And just because this caused so much of a hiccup in my design, I need to mention it one more time. Don't use that blue tape that I'm using on the dip. It bonds to the dip itself and makes a mess. Don't do it. Biggest mistake that I made right there. Also, don't mind that this clip fogged up. It's the only clip, I promise, that messed up like this. I don't know why it did this when all the others didn't, but yeah. Sorry about that. So for the main color, I decided to go with blue. Main reason is I actually had enough left over from doing my sister's car that I figured I could just do this, because I knew I was going to do a livery which would cover up a lot of space. As you can see on the hood, I'm only doing the edges, and I also don't have a top, so that saves a whole lot of dip there. When ordering it for my sister's car, I wasn't sure what size to get, so I got a large car just in case, because I wasn't sure. So it ended up paying off in the long run, which is the end reason why we went up with this blue instead of another color. So if you're wondering, it took about a full afternoon to do just the blue on its own. It took about 5 to 6 coats, as I mentioned before, and you have to wait about 20 to 30 minutes in between each coat. I think the perfect recommendation is 15, but since it was a little cooler, you want to wait just a bit longer for it to cure. So that's what I did there, just if you guys were curious about how long it would take. And that's not counting the time it took to tape off anything. another reminder to take off the tape when it's wet. I don't want you guys to be plastic for the car and then accidentally ruin it just because you waited too long. So another reminder for you. That I really like about Plastic that they've just started to offer semi-recently is that they do clear coats now, which I think is really important for something, because if you don't want that matte finish, then you're going to need an option. So I just want to say that clear coat doesn't give it a perfect gloss, it gives it more of a really nice smooth satin finish, which I think is really cool in the end and works for me in what I'm doing. But if you're looking for like a showroom gloss, I don't think this is quite the way to go. You may have to do more layers than really necessary. I think I did 5 or 6 for this one, but it ended up with just exactly what I was looking for and expecting. So this wraps up the end of phase 1, but it's not it. I'm going to make a couple more videos. One, I really want to explain everything that went right and the things that went wrong, so that way you guys know. And then also, I already have the next project car here, and I'm already shopping for things, and it's going to start quick, so be ready. Thanks guys. Subscribe!